We'll go ahead and get started. I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are David Rosacker, Michael Pate, Jeff Moore, Patrick Morse, Christine Carnes, Vice Chair. I am Greg Rosenbaum, Chairman, and Sydney is here also. Sydney Franklin, thank you. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Dave Fanslau, Planning Director, Eric England, Assistant Planning Director, Mike Carter, Acting Current Planning Manager, Robert LaRocco, Planning Board Administrator, Jennifer Taylor of the City Law Department, and Lisa Agins, our Recording Secretary. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. Copies of today's agenda are located on the table in front of us. You're welcome to come down and pick one up. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases are perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, have already been heard, or been recommended for layover, and therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. This case will then be heard in the order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium, clearly state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant. After the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed, and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please clearly state your name, address, and whom you are representing for the record, and enter it in on the sign-in sheet. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has been previously said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and please turn off your cell phones. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to the board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so that they are made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well as to the rest of the public. Rezoning matters are an exception to this rule. A current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act can be found in a white binder on the east wall of this room. And there are no changes to the consent agenda, so I will get started reading the consent cases. Agenda item number 4, case C10-20-112, applicant, Omaha Public Schools. It is on for approval. Request approval of the MCC Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District. This was laid over from our June meeting. Location 5810 South 42nd Street, northwest of 42nd and Y Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 6, case C7-20-110, applicant Bennington Public Schools. It is on for approval. The request, approval of a conditional use permit to allow secondary education facilities in the R4 district with a waiver to section 55-186 height to allow a 38-foot tall building. This was laid over from our June meeting. Location, west of 168th Street and Military Road. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none, moving on to agenda item number 7, case C7-20-57. Applicant, New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, AT&T. It is on for approval. Request approval of a conditional use permit to allow a broadcast tower in the GI district with a waiver of section 55-506 height to allow a 150-foot monopole. A portion of the property is located within the floodway overlay district. This was laid over from our May meeting. Location, northeast of 28th and Clay Streets. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 10, case C3-19-232, applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. It is on for layover. Request approval of the 10 Square Townhomes TIF redevelopment project plan. Location, 618 through 636 North 46th Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none, agenda item number 12, case C10-20-118, C12-20-119. Applicant, Paul Wagner. It is on for approval. Request preliminary and final plat approval of Fairmont Creamery, a minor plat inside city limits with rezoning from DS to CBD. Property is located within an ACI overlay district. Location, northwest of 12th and Jones Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Seeing none, I'll move on to agenda item number 16, case C10-20-123. Applicant, Future Dev LLC. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from GI to NBD. Property is located within an ACI overlay district. Location, 1738 South 13th Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 17, case C10-20-124. Applicant, Jeff Brown. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from DR and R1 to DR. Property is located within an ED Environmental Resources Overlay District. Location, 10420 North 48th Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none, moving on, agenda item number 19, case C11-19-181, applicant, Access Bank. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to the PUR Plan Unit Redevelopment Overlay District. Location, 6405 Center Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none, agenda item number 20, case C10-20-125, C11-20-126. Applicant, Bolt Capital LLC. It is on for approval. The request, approval of a PUR Plan Unit Redevelopment Overlay District, along with approval of the MCC Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District. Location, 13325 Millard Ave. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none, the final case would be agenda item number 21, case C8-20-127. Applicant, Cox Corporate Services, Inc. It is on for approval. The request, approval of a special use permit to allow equipment repair services in the LI district. Portions of the property are located within the flood fringe overlay district. Location, 2910 North 118th Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion for those items on consent for approval?
Motion to approve cases number 4, 6, 7, 12, 16, 17, 19, 20, and 21.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Carnes? Yes. Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin? Yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Do we have a motion for consent items on for layover?
Motion to lay over item 10.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin? Yes. Carnes? Yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Any of those cases that were just on consent are voted on today, no further action will be taken. You are welcome to stay. You're welcome to leave. The first 3 cases are administrative meeting only, which means there won't be the opportunity for any public testimony. I'll get started with agenda item number 1, case C10-19-245, C12-19-246, applicant Walnut Grove LLC, request final plat approval of Hanover Falls Center, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to DR, R6, and MU. This was laid over from our June meeting. Location, northwest of 156th and State Streets. Eric?
Yeah, so this final plat, as mentioned, was laid over at the June Planning Board meeting, was recommended for approval of the preliminary plat at February Planning Board and then approved by City Council on April 21st. The site includes 45 acres, includes 10 lots, 8 of which will be mixed-use zoning and 2 that will be for multifamily apartments, which would include approximately 205 units. There are a few items that the applicant is continuing to work with city staff on, one of those being specifically the wetlands mitigation. We need to finalize that before proceeding to City Council, but it's a very small area that's being mitigated. We just need to make sure that the grading for 159th Street does not increase the need for any further mitigation. That being said, staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R6, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use agreement prior to City Council. Approval of the final plat, subject to meeting the following 2 conditions in the recommendation report prior to City Council.
Any comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R6, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council, and approval of the final plat of Hanover Falls Center, subject to meeting the 2 conditions in the department's recommendation report prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris? Yes. Franklin? Yes. Carnes? Yes. Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Agenda item number 2, case C10-20-45, C12-20-46, applicant Woodsonia North Streams LLC, request final plat approval of North Streams lots 1 through 208, outlots A through H, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to DR, R4, and MU, location northeast of 204th and Q Streets. Eric?
Yeah, so this is the first phase of North Streams development. It includes 104 acres, 208 lots, 198 of those for single-family residential and 10 of those for mixed-use zoning, and includes 8 outlots. This was before the preliminary plat before the board and April Planning Board and approved by City Council on May 19th. There are a few items that will have to be finalized before proceeding to City Council, including the inclusion of a green corner at the intersection of 204th and Q, as well as an extension of the median on 201st Street, and then a few items within the mixed-use development agreement. But the applicant will continue to work with us on those items prior to City Council. Unless you have any questions, staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R4, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use plan prior to City Council, and approval of the final plat subject to the 3 conditions in the recommendation report.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I motion for approval of the rezoning from AG to DR, R4, and MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use development plan prior to forwarding to the request to City Council, and approval of the final plat, subject to meeting the 3 conditions in the recommendation report.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Moore,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Franklin,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 3, case C10-18-275, C12-18-276. Applicant Lauren Johnson Celebrity Homes, Omaha, request final plat approval of Lakeview 168, lots 137 through 266, outlots F through K, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG to R4, location southwest of 168th and Ida Streets. Eric.
Yeah, so this is the second phase final plating for Lakeview 168. It includes 35 acres, 130 single-family residential lots, and 6 outlots. Phase 1 was just approved at City Council on June 16th. There are only a couple of items needing to be addressed. One will be finalization of a trail location from the development to the adjacent Flanagan Lake Trail Network, Trail Network. And then the second item would be for the representatives to continue working with city staff in ensuring that the entire HWS Cleveland Boulevard right-of-way is within the SID boundaries, which they are currently working with us on. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG to R4 and approval of the final plat subject to the 3 conditions in the recommendation report.
Any comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve rezoning from AG to R4 and approval of the final plat subject to meeting the 3 conditions in the staff report prior to forwarding to City Council.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Franklin,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, that ends the administrative only part. We'll move on for the public meeting. Agenda item number 5, case C8-20-107, applicant Custom Concrete Designs, Inc., request approval of a special use permit to allow construction yard in the DS district. Property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district. This was laid over from our June meeting. Location 1804 Paul Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Williams. I'm an attorney at Baird Home Law Firm. My address is 1700 Farnham Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Custom Concrete Designs. Custom Concrete Designs is asking for a special use permit for the property at 1804 Paul Street, which it currently has under contract to purchase. The property is currently used as a semi-truck dispatching center, and Custom Concrete Designs intends to use the property as its home office and storage site for its concrete construction business. The day-to-day operations of the property will consist of office and clerical use, along with storage for construction equipment. Custom Concrete Designs anticipates only 7 employees will be at the property each day, and all of its construction jobs are completed off-site. The office will abide by normal business hours, which will limit the impact to surrounding properties. The change in use will also result in a decrease in semi-truck traffic in the neighborhood. The city has recommended approval of the special use permit with conditions. We have actively worked with the city for the past 3 months to secure this permit, and we will continue to do so to meet the stipulated conditions. Troy Wendells, the owner of CCD, and Dan Dozel, the engineer working on this project, are also here and present today. We're all happy to answer any questions you may have about the property. We appreciate your time and consideration on this matter, and we ask that you approve the special use permit. Thank you.
Okay. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Eric, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Just to reiterate what Natalie said, the applicant has worked with us extensively and made several of the changes that we had requested in the previous report for the layover. They submitted a revised site and landscape planning, providing 15 feet of landscaping along the western, northern, and northeastern portions of the property, including closing some access drives and continuing to work with Public Works on the existing sewer line through the site. Staff recommends approval of the special use permit to allow construction yard in a DS district, subject to the 13 conditions in the recommendation report. We had provided you an updated report prior to the meeting.
Any additional comments, questions from the board? Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the special use permit to allow construction yard in a DS downtown services district, subject to the 13 conditions outlined in the recommendation report.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Franklin?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 8, case C3-20-116, applicant city planning on behalf of the city of Omaha. Request approval of the disposal of city-owned property to an interested party, location northwest of 13th and Locust Streets. And Eric, you're presenting?
Yes, I'll present on behalf of the city of Omaha. This request is for the disposition of 4 parcels totaling approximately 19,520 square feet to an interested party. That interested party is the adjacent landowner on the west, Enterprise Industrial Park LLC. There are no development plans specified with this request at this time. However, the applicant of that adjacent property had previously come to the board for plating and had discussed some general industrial type proposals, and they are continuing to identify potential tenants for that land and presumably this small currently city-owned property as well. I do want to point out that there is a few remnants of city right-of-way that is not included in this disposition. If there is a desire to vacate any of that, that would have to go through the proper channels through Planning Board and City Council.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments, questions? Did you want to add anything?
Just recommend approval.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Oh, real quick, Dave, sorry. I do want to point out that this will have to go through the appraisal process prior to City Council and would have to be sold at fair market value. So.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Carnes?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin? Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 9, case C3-20-128, applicant city planning on behalf of the city of Omaha. Request approval of the disposal of city-owned property to Holy Name Housing under Community Development Law. Location 1620 Clark Street. And Eric, you presenting?
Yes, I will. So this is also a currently city-owned piece of property. This would be disposed of in a slightly different manner under community development law. So this would not go through the same appraisal process as the last case. This property is approximately 36,500 square feet and ownership would be transferred to Holy Name Housing Corporation for future residential development. I believe they're looking at approximately 17 lots to develop on the site. Nebraska state law grants City of Omaha discretion in the disposition of real property, and under Nebraska community development law, sale of property in a CRA and subject to a redevelopment plan may be sold for purposes outlined in said plan. The applicant will need to coordinate with city staff on any potential plating or future zoning items.
Okay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the board? Eric, did you want to add?
Just recommend approval.
Okay. Do we have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Rosacker? Yes. Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris? Yes. Franklin?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
We're going to take agenda items number 11 and 15 together. I'll read them both. Agenda item number 11 is case C3-20-117. Applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of the 44th and Douglas TIF redevelopment project plan. Location, southwest of 44th and Douglas Street. And agenda item number 15, case C10-20-99, C11-20-100. Applicant, Dan Merrick. It is, request is rezoning from R8 to CC with approval of a PUR plan unit redevelopment overlay district. Property is located within an ACI overlay district. Location, southwest of 44th and Douglas Street. May we hear from the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. As you indicated, the property is located at 4415 Douglas Street, and which is the southwest corner of 44th and Douglas. I have an aerial photograph just to show the, oh, this doesn't work. All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
So anyway, this is 44th Street here, Douglas Street here. The existing conditions, it's 4 lots. There's currently an office building, a recording studio, warehouse, and some surface parking, and then there's some residential houses within that. And you can notice I outlined in black the outer boundary of the redevelopment area that we're talking about here today. So the proposed redevelopment plan is to turn this property, raise all the buildings that are currently there, rezone the property from R8 ACI 1 to CC ACI 1 with a PUR overlay to allow for the construction of a seven-story building. It's about 96 feet in height. There, 6 stories will be the hotel itself, and there's approximately 95 to 102 rooms in this particular hotel. As far as the flag, we have a pretty good idea of who it is, and it's a good one, but I'm not sure we can announce it yet before that's actually under agreement. But then the first level is retail. There's just 3 bays that are being shown currently. It's about 7,300 square feet of retail. As far as the parking, and let me, before we get onto that, I'll show you the We have met with the planning staff and meet all the requirements of ACI. It's actually a very attractive building, as you'll note. I believe that is the north elevation of the building. And that is the south elevation of the structure. But again, you know, brick, veneer, glass, elements of stone, you know, all the requirements of the ACI 1. So again, a very attractive building. With respect to the parking, there are 38 parking stalls that are actually located within the structure itself. There are 7 additional stalls on the south side of the building here. And then there are 18 surface parking stalls that are immediately to the west of the structure. And then there are 5 parking stalls that can be utilized, parallel parking along Douglas Street. So the total parking is 68 being provided. There are 112 stalls required if you didn't have the PUR. But again, the PUR allows for the reduction of parking. And in this particular case, we're within 300 feet of a metro area transit station, as well as we'll be providing bike lockers. And then there's others on-street, even though it's not counted, there's other on-street opportunities along Douglas Street further to the west. And then I'd point out that the Visit Omaha actually has about an average occupancy in Omaha of 65% or so on average for hotels within the city. So if you take that 65% average and multiply it by the 95 to 102 rooms, you really only are about 60 rooms a night max. So we think there's plenty of parking for guests at this particular hotel. The parking area is also accessible off the alleyway that's located immediately south of the building as well. The waivers that we're seeking under the PUR are building coverage and FAR, and then building height. We can go into those in more detail if you'd like, but we do have support of the department for those various items. As far as the public improvements that are being involved with respect to the TIF, there's modern street lighting, sidewalks, new curb and street improvements, landscaping, and water and utility extensions. I'll just jump into the TIF too, and Don can concur with me or point something out if I've misstated anything. But we're expecting 20 full-time jobs with this particular development, 20 full-time jobs, 12 part-time jobs for a total of 32 jobs, approximately 50 jobs during construction. The total estimated costs of this project are $17.5 million, and the TIF eligible expenses are $3,061,575. The TIF request will be for $3 million, and the existing land and improvements are about $898,000. So obviously a significant increase in the valuation upon full build-out that supports the amount of the TIF. Again, we believe it meets all the requirements of the community development law. We're here to answer any questions that you might have regarding the rezoning and/or the TIF, but I'll turn it over to Don to see if he has anything to add with respect to this development. But thank you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry. I think Mr. Jobin's covered everything pretty much in detail. I would add that, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning Department, presenting on behalf of the tax increment financing request and on behalf of the city. I would add that the developer is MH Ozone 1 LLC, which is Dan Merrick, who has some experience, quite a bit of experience in the Omaha market with hotel development and operations. The site is in a community redevelopment area. I'll just reiterate that the total investment in the project is $17.5 million, just a little north of that. And the applicants are requesting $3 million in tax increment financing support. That this project does meet the requirements of the city's TIF program. It's an appropriate land use for the area, and it complies with the city's master plan. And staff asked for your approval as well.
Thank you, Don. Any other proponents that wish to speak?
Mark Sweet, 5310 South 84th, representing Don and Millie's, located just southwest of the proposed development. But sorry to throw you a little bit of a curve. I think one of the properties you outlined in your diagram is not under this. It's owned by Don and Millie's, and we may want to visit about that.
If there was a mistake there, I hand wrote that before the meeting, so that's not legally binding.
But we're supportive of the project. but we ought to get together. But we ought to get together to visit about that. Thank you, Larry.
Okay. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents that wish to come forward and speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Larry, did you need to add any more?
Actually, I kind of drew that from memory, sitting at my desk with a Sharpie and a ruler. So, shame on me.
Okay.
But I'm not including your property, so.
Hey,
Yes,
Larry, while
thank
you're
you.
up there, I just have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Parking, if I might. So you mentioned you think it's adequate parking, but what happens if the occupancy is at full capacity? I mean, there's some off-street parking, but not much. What's going to happen?
I think the proposed development of a hotel in this particular area primarily complements the med center, and I think a lot of people are not necessarily bringing cars there. There's Uber, there's mass transit, there's plenty of parking, if you will.
They won't
This
be parking on
same,
Med Center property, though. will they?
there will not be parking on Med Center, well, unless there's an agreement in the future, but there isn't currently one, that's true. There is talk about additional parking. The ownership group is generally the same between the Home 2 across the street and this particular hotel, so there may be some cross-parking opportunities there on those overflow event nights. So my developer and client, who's done quite a few hotels, not only in the Omaha metropolitan area, but also in Kansas City, and I believe in Nashville and some other cities, but he's comfortable that we meet all the parking requirements that they'll ever need at this particular space. Remember also, the retail component will not be operating at all at nighttime, so all those spaces will be dedicated for the hotel use.
Okay. I just see that a little bit of a challenge perhaps could be a challenge. You hope it is, honestly, a challenge, because that means that they're a full occupancy, and that's better for the hotel, right, and the owners, but
Correct.
obviously parking's always a concern on these tight developments like this, but.
Right.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Mike, that's it?
That's it.
You're not going to challenge the TIF?
Well, I'd be, no, I'm not going to. I'll give a pass on this one.
Eric?
Yeah, so I'll just touch briefly on the parking. So we have the listed number of stalls for 68 in the PUR request. The ownership does have an additional 14 stalls nearby that is not part of the PUR, but very close proximity to the site. As Larry mentioned, they do have that potential for the overflow for the adjacent hotel directly to the northwest. And just based on its location, near Dodge, proximity to the Nebraska Medical Center, there is not very many residential properties in this area. It's not a single-family neighborhood where potential street parking, if there was the need for that, doesn't spill over into any single-family residence. There is an apartment building to the north that did go through the PUR process with reduction of parking on their own as well. So I just wanted to touch on that, and the staff is comfortable with the waivers, including the parking being provided. Larry touched on most other items of the PUR, so I won't go into that. And just basically say that the proposed project is generally supported by the transit-oriented development goals found in the land use, transportation, and urban design elements of the master plan that was amended last year. And that also the project will complement growth of the UNMC Nebraska Medicine campus by adding hospitality and retail services in this area. Is consistent with the general provision proposed in the Destination Midtown Plan. Unless you have any questions, staff recommends approval of the rezone. Oh, actually, we have two cases here.
Yep,
Why
number
don't
11
we
first.
start on number 11? So for agenda item number 11, staff recommends approval.
Do we have a motion? Motion to approve. We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Pate?
Yes.
Moore? Yes. Morris? Yes. Franklin? Yes. Carnes? Yes. Rosacker? Yes. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, and then agenda item
For-
number 15.
Yep, for agenda item 15, staff recommends approval of the rezoning from R8 to CC. Approval of the PUR, subject to submittal of acceptable final plans prior to City Council.
Do we have a motion?
Move for approval of the rezoning from R to CC and approval of the PUR, subject to submittal of acceptable final plans prior to forwarding to City Council.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Moore? Yes. Morris? Yes. Franklin?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Rosacker? Yes. Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, we're going to take agenda items number 13 and 18 together. Agenda item number 13, case C10-20-120, C12-20-121. Applicant, MRES Acquisitions, requests preliminary plat approval of Pacific Renaissance Replat 1, a subdivision outside city limits with rezoning from AG and R6 to R6, location northwest of 192nd and Pacific Streets. And agenda item number 18 is case C11-14-162. Applicant, MRES Acquisitions, request approval of a major amendment to the PUD Plan Unit Development Overlay District, location northwest of 192nd and Pacific Streets. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Name's Kyle Hazy with E&A Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road, Omaha, Nebraska, 68154. Representing the applicant are MRES Acquisitions, along with myself. Representatives from MRES are in the audience as well to provide any answers to questions that I can't provide you. The property in discussion this afternoon, as shown on the aerial, is in the northwest corner of 192nd and Pacific. We are requesting an amendment to the existing PUD. The existing PUD includes 9.6 acres as highlighted in the blue outline on the aerial on the screen. This is the Ravello 192 project and has been a really successful project. So the applicant is wanting to expand on that success to the north. The expansion includes the 6.9 acres as highlighted in the yellow on the screen. That is currently zoned ag, and we are looking to rezone that to the R6 PUD to be combined with the parcel to the south. The proposed site plan is shown on the screen. You can see the existing Ravello 192 project to the south. This would be an expansion of that project. It will include a mix of 6 9-plexes and 1 14-plex. That 14-plex is on the north side of the property, on the north side of what would be the expansion of Leavenworth. That is an expansion of it from the east heading west, which will eventually connect as designed to the neighborhood to the farther on the west. This would be a total of 68 units that would be in the expanded area for the R6 PUD. Up on the screen now are examples of elevations for the proposed new buildings. They'll look, the 9-plexes and the 14-plexes will look very similar. They're just an expansion of the 9-plex from the 14-plex to stretch it out a little bit more. These building elevations match the materials and feel of the project of the Ravello 192 building. As you can see here, this is what the buildings at 192 Ravello look like now. So there'll be a good match, and you can kind of get a level of feel of the materials and the quality of project that will be built. This project matches the cities of Omaha's future land use plan, and I believe will be a nice continuation of an already successful project to the south. We will continue to work with the city and meet all conditions within the recommendation report. And with that, I'll make myself available to any questions that planning board might have.
Kyle, just out of curiosity, are the existing apartments that are there now, are they pretty well occupied?
What? The buildings to the existing buildings are at 97% occupancy,
97,
so
okay.
really well.
Any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Eric?
Yeah, so I'm glad Kyle was able to provide some renderings that show the existing layout, because your GIS aerials are a couple years outdated, and the existing, it is a very good looking project. So Kyle touched on most of the items. Specifically for the plat, we do have a condition to combine Outlot A into what is the adjacent Lot 2, which is the 14-plex. Anytime there's a single user for a site, such as an apartment complex, it's better to have their stormwater detention basins on their platted lots. If it was a single family with multiple lots feeding into that basin, then that is usually when we do the outlot. But we did have conversations with E&A, and that sounds acceptable. That does alleviate any additional zoning waivers that might be needed. So that is a good solution all the way around. Also adjacent to that Lot 2 on the north side, I do want to mention there's currently a driveway access from 192nd Kyle, could you put up the, just one of the renderings or the aerials for me? Thank you. Yep, that works. So just north of the development where Kyle is pointing, that is Gray Fawn Plaza. That is a driveway accessing the one large lot to the west. That small driveway segment is zoned agricultural. Directly to the north of that has pending R5 zoning with the Everett Place and the Everett Place replats that we've done, assisted living, there's a Montessori, there's a church there as well. So the PUD plan is requesting a waiver of the setback or the buffer yard on that north, from that north building from 30 feet down to 10 feet. Considering it's just a driveway that could potentially be zoned R5 or R4 in the future, whenever that property to the west, if it's ever developed, that would be rezoned from the ag. So the zoning does make sense. It's kind of a unique scenario, but I did want to point that out because usually we don't do waivers with a PUD, but.
There, can I ask you a question on that
Yes.
real quick? So will that homeowner or property owner there that accesses that private drive be able to access through the development, the new development?
They would have that option. So 11 Worth Street, the east-west quarter mile, is currently stubbing for future connection whenever that site were to be developed. It's my understanding that that property owner wants to maintain that Gray Fawn access. Now, if either our Public Works Department or Douglas County Engineer's Office wanted to work with, or that property owner approached either entity about gaining access from Leavenworth Street, we can continue to have that conversation. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but we can definitely talk about that. But we are not forcing that at this time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and the reason I ask that is, you got two, streets that are pretty close in proximity to each other, Gray Fawn and the intersection there. But the only one, well, no, it's because the other development to the north of that can access that Gray Fawn.
Well, so you'd have 193rd Street, I believe it's called, is a little off the screen to the north and northwest, which is a north-south, which will stub a little bit north of that driveway. And ultimately, the idea is to get that entire street network that connects. And, it's been a challenge, this area. We've had, 5, 6, 7 acre parcels, which is always challenged with development. So, we've had meetings for years on this site before us, as well as some of the other sites. So I think I would advocate that it's coming together, pretty nicely. Now, of course, there's still some large properties that are remaining with their single family residents, which is fine. But if they were to ever redevelop, I think we've laid out an acceptable street network to the best of our abilities.
Okay, thank you.
So going back, I have mentioned the buffer yard, so that will need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, but staff is in support due to the unique scenario that I discussed. Parking is acceptable, the building materials is acceptable, the number of multifamily units at the intersection is acceptable, so staff is in support. So unless you have any further questions, I will start with the report of number 13. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from AG and R6 to R6, and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 13 conditions in the recommendation report.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve rezoning from AG and R6 to R6, and approval of preliminary plat of Civic Renaissance Replat 1, subject to the 13 conditions in the staff report.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris? Yes. Franklin? Yes. Carnes? Yes. Rosacker? Yes. Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, and agenda item number 18.
For 18, staff recommends approval of the major amendment to the PUD, subject to obtaining a waiver for buffer yard from the Zoning Board of Appeals and submittal of final acceptable PUD plans prior to City Council.
Do we have a motion?
Subject to obtaining a waiver for buffer yard from the Zoning Board of Appeals and submittal of acceptable final PUD plans prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Franklin? Yes. Carnes? Yes. Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris? Yes. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Thank you. Agenda item number 14, case C12-20-122, applicant City of Omaha. Request preliminary and final plat approval of Jean Leahy Mall Replat 3, a minor plat inside city limits. Property is located within an ACI overlay district, location northeast of 10th and Farnham Streets. And Eric, you're presenting?
Yes, I'm presenting on behalf of the City of Omaha. We've had several replats in this location over the course of 2020. This request for Jean Leahy Mall Replat 3 is a minor plat of 3.49 acres. The replat would be into one lot for future redevelopment of the site. As you're all aware, this is part of the larger riverfront revitalization project involving 3 civic spaces downtown: Jean Leahy Mall, Heartland of America Park, and Lewis and Clark Landing. One item that I do want to point out, this plat would vacate the remainder of an east-west alleyway and a portion of 9th Street. There's currently a city parking garage that is within that 9th Street right-of-way. There is one property in this block from 8th Street to 10th Street and Farnham Street to Douglas Street that is not included in the plat. That is more commonly known as the greenhouse building. So that building has existing easements and certain rights based on an agreement with the city dating back to the mid or late 1980s. Those easements and rights will remain as part of the vacation of that alleyway in 9th Street. The greenhouse building is acceptable to deeding over what would typically be their half of the vacated right-of-way, subject to retaining of the necessary easements and access and everything allowed from that original agreement. So the city's lead on this project, HDR, and our law department are currently working with the greenhouse building on making sure that we have all that documentation prior to the recording of the final plat. But the greenhouse building and law have been in conversations, and as I said, they are acceptable. So I think that's all I have to point out. This basically is just a cleanup effort to allow the park improvements as we move forward.
Okay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Additional comments or questions from the board? Eric, any more?
Just that staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 3 conditions in the report, and then approval of the final plat subject to those conditions prior to City Council.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Preliminary plat subject to the 3 conditions in the staff report. Approval of final plat subject to the conditions of the preliminary plat approved prior. Preliminary. I can't talk today. Preliminary plat approval prior to forwarding to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Carnes?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
motion approved.
that was the last case. Do we have a motion on last month's pre-meeting minutes?
I move to approve the pre-meeting minutes from, what was that date? June 3rd?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote, please?
Rosacker? Yes. Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Do we have a motion on the public meeting minutes?
Move to approve the planning board minutes from June 3rd.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Pate?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes, I did have one question about I'm not sure it says when I left, but I'm okay with it. It says that I recused myself, so, I'm okay. Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Before we ask for an adjournment, sir, were you here for a particular case, or? Oh, okay. It was already taken.
You're welcome.
Everybody's fine? All right. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Moore?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Franklin?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved, adjourned 2:23.
Awesome.
Hmm?
Lisa?